Hello, friends, and welcome to the Limitless Podcast. This is Deanna Herrin, your host. Welcome back. If you are a seasoned podcaster with me, thank you for being a part of this amazing community. And if you are new to this podcast, I want to welcome you. In this podcast, I talk all things mindset, leadership, entrepreneurship. And on today's podcast, I have a very special guest that I actually met through a mastermind. And she has such an amazing, amazing story. She is a new author of a book that we're going to talk about today. And so I want to welcome to the podcast, Brooke DeBoer. And Brooke, I'm so excited for you to share just your life, your story. It's so inspiring, so encouraging. And I know with what's going on right now, as we are recording this, it is Bullying Awareness Month. And I think what you have to share is going to make a difference in everybody's life that is a part of this podcast, because just bringing awareness to the forefront of bullying is a big time issue, and not just an issue for our children, but as we have discussed with adults as well. So I would love for you just to introduce yourself to everyone and share a story about how the book came about. Share a little bit about that journey as well. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy talking with you. So my book, Living the Free Life, a step-by-step guide to overcoming bullying, abuse, and living the life of your dreams, was something that was put on my heart a little over 2 years ago. I think I always felt like I had a book in me, but I believe that God put it on my heart to share my stories of bullying and abuse. I've been on a healing journey for quite some time, and I just feel like it was time. So I got a message and a couple of years ago, and it just felt like time. So, and simultaneously, I had received some information from a publishing group on my email, which I think is interesting. God's timing is always perfect, and usually things line up like that when it's time to do something. So, I signed up. I kind of did it on a whim. I remember exactly where I was. I was in the kitchen at our house in Manhattan Beach, California. And I had been spending a lot of time alone. My family wasn't with me. And I just got a really strong message, like, it's time to start writing out, your story. And then I had a discovery call with the publishing group. And within 30 minutes, I found myself signing up and paying for the publishing support to get the book done.
Wow.
So it's now 2 years later. It took me a lot longer than I thought. They pitch you that you can get it done in a fairly short amount of time, and I probably could have, but there was a lot of resistance all the way through. It was a very emotional story to write, and I feel like it has just come about in perfect timing. I was telling somebody at my book launch party this weekend that I haven't even told my mom this, but my mom experienced a trauma when I was 3-4 years old. It was by a stranger. So it was a different situation than what I experienced, but it's not something I write extensively about because I feel like it's her story, but I mention it in the book, and some of the feelings that I had around that carried through because I was raised by somebody who had had a trauma, and I was young and absorbing the emotion in the household. So, but I was resisting releasing the book, and the publishing company just kind of pushed me out of the nest and said, we're going to release the book now. And it ended up being released on her birthday, July 24th.
Oh, wow.
So I don't even think she knows this, but
Oh,
I do believe when we tell our story about bullying and abuse and we process it and we get safe people to work through it with, counselors, safe adults, family and friends who support us wholeheartedly, and help us not feel ashamed about our past. I believe wholeheartedly that this is something that can bless so many people, because I think when you're bullied and abused, there's a lot of shame attached to it. There's even guilt. Sometimes you take too much responsibility for it. You feel like some of it's your fault. I could go on and on.
yeah. 100% agree. So we have very similar stories in that we both heard the voice to write a book. Um, so I'm curious for you, did you have any idea going into like pen to paper, putting your story out on paper, how that would completely open you up? Did you have
Mm.
any idea? Because you're probably a lot like me, where I told my story to some people, like, and had counseling through my childhood, but to actually put pen to paper, it was a whole different experience for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, the minute you put pen to paper, it's very real. It's a whole different level of real. I had that exact experience. I thought, you know what, I'm ready to do this. I've had counseling, I've talked to safe family and friends. I've been doing this for years. And then a whole nother level of vulnerability came about when it came time to like share it with the world too.
Mhm.
So, and there was a lot of tears, right? But it was so cathartic for me. Like I can remember some times where I just sat and like bawled when I was writing the words. But like I would feel good afterwards, like, huh. And then I also wrote in my preface in the book, in my intro, like I wrote to bullies too, because I know just, and maybe this is from my faith, that like I believe God's children are good. And somewhere along the line, you have, something happen and maybe you become the bully, because you're hurting. And I believe hurt people hurt people. So when I wrote the book, I also wrote it for the bullies so they could know that like their shame also can be released through work, through asking for forgiveness of others, through doing, the personal works to take care of your own hurt. I think that's a whole other part of this. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true because all of us experience some level of trauma in our lifetime, right? And so a bully is just projecting the trauma that they've experienced. They don't know how to process it. They're projecting that trauma on other people. So yeah, it's so interesting. But that yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic to actually write your story and know, okay, so there are going to be people that are actually going to be reading this. So it's a whole different level of vulnerability. But I would really love for you to share your story. And you have so many great tips. Um, things like I love how you had abuse in there's various different types of abuse and how to identify those. I particularly would love to hear as well how you connect with your higher power through just the process of your healing. So, yeah, I just want you to share your story.
Okay. So, and you may have to put me back on track because my story was over many years. So it started in elementary school with the dominant personality girls, telling us where we could go, what we could do. And then when I didn't comply, being uninvited to parties, sitting alone, crying, and not having anybody feel, sad for me or anything, I was alone. So social isolation. Then in middle school, I received some attention from some boys that some older girls didn't like, as one boy in particular. And she locked on to me like a heat seeking missile and was putting notes in my locker that were the worst things that, like, in a way, I kind of wish I held on to it, but I don't know if I'd ever want to like read them again. Like, I remember getting a folded up note that somebody slipped into my locker, and it was the worst things that you could ever think of to say to somebody. And I just like, I felt like I was like, I almost just like died inside. Like, I was like, who wrote this? It was anonymous. Eventually later, I put two and two together and started to figure out that it was somebody who had a jealousy issue about a particular boy. Um, you know, that was just another one. And then I mean, there were quite a few for me. High school, the worst one was another older girl, 1 year older. I didn't know it was her, but I was receiving death threats at my house over the phone. So we didn't have like cell phones and stuff. I can only imagine what that would have ramped up to nowadays with
Right.
social media, cell phones, and how
Yeah.
much access kids have to each other. They had to call through my house. So even my parents were getting the threats. if I answered the phone, they were coming to me, but it was like, I'm going to kill your daughter at school tomorrow, or I will kill you tomorrow at school. And it's like, okay, like, and you don't know who it is or whatever. So my parents took the path of alerting the authorities, which I think I would still do today. They called the Washington County Police up in Portland, and they traced the calls to this particular girl's house and found out it was her and her boyfriend that just thought it was fun to intimidate somebody. I didn't even ever have a problem with her directly. But that was a really scary time, and I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't, like, my mom reminded me even today, she's like, you didn't want me to even intervene or do anything. I didn't want to be further embarrassed. I didn't want to be a victim. I didn't want anyone to know. It was awful. So went through that. There were other just being removed out of cliques or uninvited to things, even in high school. And I would just be strong. I would just try to be strong and try not to tell anybody. So like when people ask me like what are the signs somebody is being bullied or abused, it's kind of tough because I think everybody responds differently. For me, my mom became aware because I would like be sleeping a lot of hours at home, so luckily I had a mom who was paying attention. So she like was alerted something was not right. Like a lot of kids withdraw, they'll become agitated, or there'll be a sudden change in behavior, or you'll see them pulling away from social groups, all of that. So anyway, all of that is kind of talked about in the book. And it's what I hope to get out there and talk about more and talk to kids about, because I think if you kind of know the signs, you know how to identify it, possibly prevent something really bad from happening with somebody. So then, because of all of these negative tapes kind of playing in my head that never got fully processed and never got counseling for it, I did have a mom who was looking out for me and trying to advocate, and a dad, but I don't know. I didn't really want their help. Like I wanted it just all to go away, to be honest.
Right.
And then, I think my self-esteem was affected, but maybe I didn't know it. And then I ended up with, I was like a really nice people-pleasing kind of a person and just didn't want to have the problem. So I got sucked into some toxic relationships, and then ended up with a man who, he ultimately ended up throwing me down. We were having an argument, and this was in college. And I didn't want to go to a party because there was disrespectful people there from my workplace. We worked together, and he just refused to listen. And so the argument was getting ramped up, and I stepped out of the car and I said, I'm not going in there. I was trying to establish a boundary, and he was just running all over, stepping all over my boundaries. And finally he grabbed my forearms, and I said, let go of me, and, tried to do this with my arms. He just took me and slammed me on the ground, left me. So, that was sort of the end of the abuse for me, as far as like the really overt abuse, because there's still a story after this. Like it goes on because I found out I had a little guardian angel. I talk about this in the book, drive by, because I'm like, I could hear everybody snickering in the garage of the party of the house, disrespectful people. And
Wow.
he left me there. It was dark. It was some kind of party, and I had a really nice guy pull up, and, they tell you not to really talk to strangers, especially in a dark cul-de-sac, but it was my only choice. And he just said, are you okay? And I said, I don't think so. My arm, I can't move my arm. I don't have a ride home. I'm with somebody who did this to me. So, and he said, okay, well, my mom's a nurse. Get in my car and I'll take you to my house. And probably wouldn't be the safest thing. I would hate to know that my daughters were in that situation, but he happened to be a good person. His mom was a nurse. I refused to go to the hospital because I was afraid of I was afraid of him. I was afraid of the reactions. If anybody found out, I was afraid of everything. I just didn't have any confidence. So, and if within a week, without, you can read the book because it's kind of a long story, but within a week I was, well, actually my friend picked me up that night. And then that week I stayed with her and her mom, and I started to feel things. My body didn't feel the same. And I started to question if maybe I was pregnant. So I took a pregnancy test, and sure enough, I was. So this is somebody he was isolating me from friends, slowly. And this had already happened. And then there was control. And then that was like, everything was about his family and what he wanted to do. And I was kind of going along, but then it was starting to get like concerning because I would say something that bothered me and I would just get run over, you know. And then it ended up in this situation where I was thrown down. And that's when I knew I was in trouble. But I was scared to do anything about it. The key for me, I think, there are a few turning points for me, but the key was when I was afraid to get my stuff out of his apartment. So my friend said, I think you should call the police and just you can get a police escort. And see, these are things most people, they don't know what to do, you know?
Right.
So they said, you could get a police escort. So I said, okay, that sounds good. So I called the police. They came to the door of my friend and her mom's house. I answered the door and he, you know, went through, he asked me what had happened and I told him. And then he said, I can help you get your things out of his house. No problem. I can escort you over there. But he said, how, I remember this distinctly. He said, how big are you? Or how tall are you? And I said, 5'3", maybe a little bit of change. And how much do you weigh? You know, and I'm 110, 115, whatever. And he's like, how big is he? And I'm like, well, he's 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", and he's a big guy. And he's like, okay, so I'm going to say something to you as a person, and then I'm going to tell you as a police officer what we're going to do next. And he said, as a person, no man should ever, or anyone of that size should ever be laying their hands on you and forcing, you know, throwing you to the ground or using any kind of force whatsoever. So he just kind of spoke to me as like a guy, you know, this is not okay. And then he said, I can help you get your things, but because Florida is a zero tolerance state for domestic abuse, I have to press charges because of what you told me.
Wow.
And then I was like, no, 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 don't press charges. Because I was afraid of his family too. Anyway, so, but he proceeded with that. And then that created a big thing. And I think I was able to stop that because he sucked me back in and but I was smart enough to say I want to move back to Oregon. We were in Florida at the time, and I was smart enough to say I want to be near my family if I'm going to have a child, you know. So that was a good move because again, I talk about in the book, supportive family and friends. Make sure you have safe people, you know. So I wasn't totally out of the woods yet, but I was headed back to be around safe people. And sure enough, it didn't take much longer after that he was just emotionally and verbally being abusive and unkind. And I finally asked him to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't take very long with being in the support of my family and friends. And my dad supported me, offered him a place to stay until he could go get his own. And he just got in his car and drove back to Florida. So that was that.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you said something that was so super powerful that I want to go back to that I think would be great for everyone to hear. When this first happened to you in third grade,
Mm-hmm.
because you and I have just talked about the story, and
Right.
the story was that you had just made a comment, let's go play on the swings.
Mm-hmm.
And because you made the suggestion and had other people in your group follow your suggestion, this other person basically canceled you and uninvited you to a party.
Correct.
And then others, you know, the other situations that have happened, you basically, and this happens to so many women, and I want women to understand how we eventually go into that people pleasing place, right. Is that you shut your voice down a little bit, like, okay, well, I'm not going to speak out this time because last time I got canceled. I didn't get to go to the Halloween party. And so we learn not to use our voice.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn to be a chameleon in every situation and just go with the flow because there were consequences for us standing up for ourselves. There was basically a consequence for you calling the police escort, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You didn't want the charges filed, which, you know, I get that. But we are programmed by these circumstances not to speak up.
exactly. And because I had so many of them, I didn't realize the programming that was there.
Hmm.
And that's why in the book I put a lot of reflection questions because I want to get people thinking about, what is going on in here and especially in your heart, like to be beginning to like really be honest with yourself. I mean, even to this day, and I consider myself confident and I understand my worth and I can intellectualize about all of this. And I feel like I'm very emotionally healthy now. When I go to meetings where there's groups, I sometimes struggle with having a strong opinion about something like a board meeting or something. And so it does live in you and you have to keep working on it because it's important. Your voice matters. What you have to say matters and what you have in you. I believe God gives us all things that we are to share in this world. We have a purpose. And I talk about it in the book. I use the metaphor of a puzzle. One missing piece makes the picture incomplete. And unfortunately, just so many people don't get that. They don't get that there's enough room to go around for everybody. There's plenty of room because it's God's design, right? We're all supposed to do something. So that's why I love to coach people too, because if I can help get people to be emotionally healthy, and I also ask they work with a counselor if they're not emotionally stable, but I can help them with some things. And then I focus in on like, what is your purpose? What is your heart calling you to do? And because I think it's really important for the happiness of our world.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. So how I had a very similar experience about my voice, by the way, when we were talking about that. And it happened to be in third grade. And we had just moved to and I was in a new school, and the teacher asked me to read a paragraph. So all of us were taking turns reading a paragraph. And I loved the way the teacher had the inflection she had in her voice. She just had this beautiful way of reading. And so I tried to copy that when I read my paragraph. And she goes, no, 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 no. Do it again in front of the entire class. So I started over. She goes, no, stop, stop. Who else would like to read this chapter for the new girl? She can't seem to figure it out.
Oh, wow.
So that is when I closed down.
I can
And
see why.
and yeah, so we have to look at where was it that we learned to not use our voice.
Yeah.
And your story is so powerful, Brooke, because you actually learned to use your voice by writing the book.
That's what I'm finding.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I probably never felt more empowered, but I've never felt more scared to put something out into the world either. So there are quotes about that, I think. Right before the breakthrough is, I don't know, I don't remember quotes very well, but it's usually one of the most challenging times.
Yes.
So I guess a message I have to your viewers is hang in there, because if it's getting really hard, that probably means that you're due for a breakthrough. And hang on, keep doing the work. It's really, really important work. And the world needs you. Whatever it is that you have to share, the world needs you. So if somebody's tried to snuff out your light, it's just because they felt insecure or they were threatened in some way, or, um, so I can't say it enough. It's very important for us to do this work, and also for us to be aware, like as moms and just community members, because I think we have, unfortunately, a lot of unhealthy people out there that have maybe been subject to generations of cycles of abuse. And I think it's pervasive in our society. It's pervasive in our schools, online. We have it in our political atmosphere. I think we all need to be making a stand. It's funny because this is a short story, if it's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
My first review on the book, I don't know if I told you this when we talked before, but I was so excited to get my first review. My daughter had messaged me, Mom, I made a review. And I didn't know how it worked on Amazon, that sometimes it takes 2 to 3 weeks before you get the review to post. So it was like 2 days in. People wouldn't have had time that weren't on my launch team to read the book. It was on Amazon. And I went up into my closet with my laptop and I was just quietly going to see if my daughter's review posted. I opened my laptop and I looked at the reviews with anticipation. And all of a sudden I was like, 1 star. Like I had a 1 star review as my first review, but guess who it was from? It was from my high school boyfriend, the toxic one, from 30 years ago. I mean, I'm 50 years old, so it was a long time ago. I had zero contact with this person for many, many years. And he decided to use it as an opportunity to like just bully me and bring up my brother's name and say all kinds of insulting things. And I was like in shock. I was like, is what? And then so I sat there for a minute and I was just so devastated really for a second because I was like, what in the world? Like, what am I going to do with this? I just put out a book on bullying and abuse and this guy found me here. Like, what is going on?
Is actually doing what the book is about.
Yeah, exactly. So I brought it down and I had my husband and my daughter and my daughter's boyfriend. And I said, you guys got to listen to this. I read it to them and my husband goes, perfect. This is the perfect marketing moment for you. Cause he's like in the car business and he's like, this is exactly what you wrote your book about. Now use this to show people that this is like what you're talking about. And he said, leave it up there. Like, and I became more and more comfortable with it. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like I got re-empowered in a day or two. And, I shared in general about it on social media, but I didn't name names or anything like that. Didn't want to get into that. Didn't want to give it too much attention. And maybe a week later, people had reported it and it just came down as bullying and abuse. Somebody wrote a response to it and was like, this is exactly what this book is about. And this is exactly the problem in our society. Like they used that review to, and I didn't tell anybody to do any of that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, when you stand up, people, you're going to get resistance. You're going to get pushback because bullies don't like it when you make a stand. But there's more good people in the world than there are the bullies. Sometimes it feels like there's way more bullies than there's good. And also the other messages for moms and stuff, teach your kids, they can report this stuff. If they see somebody getting bullied like that, have their back, report it. Let them know you've reported it. Let other kids know that they can go on and report it and they can write a response that this is not okay behavior, So.
Yeah. So what would you tell? Because I'm thinking specifically of, the younger generation. And I know bullying is such an issue because, not just in schools, but people are, and I get this on social media. I remember when I first started showing up on social media with my coaching, I was following a lot of, and I still do follow a lot of influencers. And Rachel Hollis is one of those that I follow.
Yes.
And I remember when she got a divorce and she went open about the divorce. The comments that people would say on that post were like gut-wrenching, like absolutely gut-wrenching. And we're talking about a grown woman that came, she was in, turmoil.
Right.
And the comments. And I just thought, wow, this is where we are in this world today, because people can hide behind a computer and write a comment. And that's just leadership 101. You write an email if you're upset, but don't send it. Wait 2 days, 3 days to even see if you still want to send it, because you're writing through anger. And so I knew, okay, this is a terrible thing for this woman to see this, but I also knew, I know I'm looking at this right now because this is preparation for what's going to happen in my business. And it has happened. People, late night, they just write terrible comments. And so there's bullying like that, which happens behind the scenes. But there's also, bullying that happens in schools and so forth. That we've always had that. But what are some of the signs that you could teach moms to recognize? You said sleep, oversleeping, sleeping
Yeah.
all the time, that they could
Agitation.
recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Agitation and moodiness. I think, teenagers can be that anyway. Even when they're having peer challenges, not necessarily bullying. But I think when it gets kind of extreme or there's a change,
Mm-hmm.
we had this recently with a particular person in our experience where everybody in the family noticed something's different. Luckily, there's lots of family members around that care. Um, Sometimes that kid will be going home to an absent parent situation or something not good too. So I think if, teaching your kids to be aware, as moms being aware, if you're hearing kids talking about something or somebody and there being some sudden change in their behavior, maybe a withdrawal from activities or socializing, um, extreme fearfulness or anxiety sometimes. I mean, anxiety seems to be something that we're all talking about these days and can just be anxiety based on online use or whatever. But it is, I mean, if you just have your radar up, like if you're teaching your kids to, I always told my girls, if you see somebody sitting alone at school on the regular, like go sit with them, put your arm around them, give them a high five, like, and keep a lookout, like be aware, be they call it an upstander instead of a bystander. Don't stand around if somebody's getting bullied or spoken poorly to by a peer too. um and with online stuff, there are things you can do. Teach your kids about privacy settings. Make sure your social is set to private until you're doing something professional and you're prepared for the comments that can come when you're listed as public. Teach kids that they can block or report. People did that for me when that bullying review went up. Um, oh, what else? And then just, I think, reminding everybody that it is important for you to get a solid core group of people that you feel like this word safe. Like if you can have hard conversations with these people, you can tell them your feelings and know that you're safe and they will not broadcast it to the world. To me, that's safe, and they'll help you get the help you need if you need it. And they don't expect you to be always perfect, always up. Like you're having a hard day, they're there for you. And if you don't have that, I list in the book places that can work with you confidentially to help you, you know. So
Amazing.
reaching out for help, so important. I kind of went all over the map there, but yeah, for moms specifically, training your kids that it's 1 in 3. So teach your kids that if 1 in 3 kids reports being bullied in the United States throughout their school experience, likely when you're in a classroom, a good portion of those kids have some form of bullying going on. So just be aware of it. And if you're aware of it and you know those things, then you might catch it. You might be able to say something to a safe adult at school or to your parents, and your parents might be able to reach out to their parents, say, is everything okay?
Yeah. So good. Yes.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to just discuss a little bit, because I think it's so powerful, is how were you able to connect to your higher power during this time?
Well, I was raised in Sunday school, so that made it a little bit easier. I grew up in church and learning the Bible stories and whatnot. And I always felt like I could go to God if there was a problem, but that's kind of what it was limited to. After college, I had moved away from going to church and would only really go if something extreme was going on. And here again, like I feel like I came back to my faith through this situation because I was really in a bad way. Like I was experiencing depression. I was pregnant. Once I asked my significant other to go, he left and it was just me. And now I was anticipating becoming a mom and there was depression. So I just reached out to my Bible and I started reading and I would just open it. Like I didn't even know where to begin. And I would just, it felt like I was being led. I can't remember the scriptures right off the top of my head, but it felt like when I would open it, there'd be something. And sometimes I get a little comfort from that. I think where it really became a really big source of like my strength was when I literally physically got on my knees in the shower at one point and just cried and asked God. I just brought everything to God. I just said, I don't know what to do. Please
Mm.
lead me to where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do. I've really screwed this up, you know? And it was just that total vulnerable moment of like just telling God everything and not being afraid to be like broken and like in need of that help.
Mm.
And then it just felt like after that, like little angels would come in the form of um like a bunch of ladies from church who I thought would judge me as my mom's church, but a bunch, our church, I guess, but a bunch of ladies put a baby shower together for me. And I'm like, okay, like this is like, I never thought this would happen because I just felt like I was kind of like, it just didn't, what had happened in my life didn't go with maybe my church value system. Right. So I was pregnant and alone and had been with an abusive man, and here now all these ladies from church were rallying around me, which is a lesson and a beautiful example of what I believe Christianity is all about is
Yeah.
you don't judge and you love on people
Right.
because people have their brokenness, and we need each other. And so they supported me. And then I just, I drew very close to God during those months while I was pregnant with Paige, just asking God to guide me, to lead me, to help me know where He wanted me to be. And it allowed me to be forgiving, to find forgiveness for what had happened for myself and for my significant other. Don't like to say his name. I changed his name in the book, so it wouldn't try to be kind, it's like you don't want to be um so yeah, so I think really
So beautiful. That just that surrender. It's just,
surrender. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's quite simple, but it was very difficult to do because I think I always was like, I always knew God was there and I always would reach to God, but then I would always want to do what I wanted to do, the
Mhm.
human will or whatever it was, or I always thought I had it figured out. And it was at this point that I knew I didn't have it figured out at all. And I needed God. And so
Mhm.
that was a great demonstration of how, and then, I mean, within like, who could have scripted the story after that? Like, started to feel more confident. I went through the pregnancy, had lots of support, the church, my parents, whatever. I had Paige at the hospital with my brother was there. He's younger by 4 years. My parents, like it was a beautiful birth. It was a long birth. I think there was some stress, being the first time, but everybody supported me. And within 3 months, Derek was reaching back out. This is my current husband. We've been married 25 years. He was reaching back out to a mutual friend saying he wanted to see me. And I said, well, does he know that I have a baby? And I'm just 3 months out of having a baby. And she's like, oh, yeah, he knows. His parents know. Like, he's really excited to see you again. Um, and then that was that. He came up to see me, and I think my parents were like, "Oh boy," they watched Paige, my daughter, for a couple hours that night, so I could go do something with that group of friends, and it was an instant connection with Derek. There was so much respect and love there, and he held my hand like a gentleman, just not trying to like put the moves on me or anything. He was just sweet, and I was a little insecure about my body. It had been 3 months, still trying to figure my emotions out, being a single mom. And he was just so sweet. And he didn't care about any of that. And he told me that it was my face that he was attracted to. He thought I had a beautiful face. He wasn't worried about anything else. He just, the qualities, of who I was as a person. And so I knew that he was answered
What a
prayer, not
blessing.
that
Mhm.
and I knew it was also early, and that I wasn't entirely ready from a human standpoint, but I did feel like God was working. So
Yes. What a beautiful story. What a beautiful ending to a story. Yeah, amazing. I'm so proud of the work that you have done. I know how hard that is to get your words out, your life out there. But Brooke, I have like no doubt you are going to touch so many lives. You've touched my heart in such a way. And I can't wait to share your book, not just with women, but I'm thinking about moms that need this book for their daughters and,
Yeah.
even their sons. So
Mhm.
thank you for doing the hard thing and getting the information out there. So
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And I feel like it's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm
yes.
thankful for the opportunity to share with you and your audience as well.
Yes. And thank you for being a guest. Such an honor. And I know that this isn't the ending of our story together. So I'm excited for, what's next for us. But you guys go pick up Brooke's book. And is it only on Amazon right now? Is that where they can
On
find it?
Amazon. Yes, right now. Actually,
Okay.
I think you can get it on Barnes and Noble because I'm set up on Ingram Spark too. So I think
Okay.
that's available at a few different retailers. Yeah, online.
Yeah. But most of us know Amazon.com because we
Yeah,
can get it tomorrow.
that's a safe one.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So the book is called Free Brooke,
It's called Living the Free Life.
Reliving the Free Life. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Living the Free
Beautiful.
Life. It's pink, so you can't miss it.
Pink, and it's got a picture of her beautiful, beautiful face.
Thank you.
And yeah, so not just overcoming bullying, you guys, but just true life and how to make it through some of the hard times in life because we all have them. So Brooke, thanks again.
Thank
And
you so much for
yeah,
having me.
yeah. And thank you everyone for joining us. Go pick up Brooke's book on Amazon, and I'll see you next week. God bless.